The distress signal. The signal came from the edge of known space, weak and broken. It reached Earth's deep space communication array on a Tuesday morning when most of the galaxy was still asleep. The message was simple, desperate, and addressed to anyone who might listen. Captain Jake Miller sat in the command center of the UES Warhammer, humanity's newest battleship. His weathered face showed the scars of a dozen conflicts across the outer colonies. The communication officer, a young woman named Lisa, handed him the decoded transmission with shaking hands. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The alien voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard before. It spoke in broken standard, the universal language of trade and diplomacy. The words came in gasps filled with terror and pain. "Please. Anyone, we are dying. The hunters have come. Our world burns. Children cry in the dark. We cannot fight them. They are too strong. Too many. If someone hears this, please. We are the Keth of planet Vera. We have done nothing wrong. We only wanted to live in peace." The message repeated 3 times before cutting to static. The bridge fell silent. Jake had seen war, had fought pirates and raiders across the frontier, but something about this transmission chilled him to the bone. "Where did it come from?" he asked. Lisa checked her instruments. "Sector 7G, sir. About 40 light years from here. The signal is old, maybe 6 months." Jake's jaw tightened. 6 months. These people had been screaming into the void for half a year, and no one had answered. The Galactic Council probably knew about it. The advanced races like the Altari and the Voss certainly had the technology to help, but they had done nothing. "Sir," came another voice from across the bridge. Tech specialist Bob was hunched over his console, his face pale. "I'm picking up more signals from that sector. Dozens of them, all the same pattern, all asking for help." Jake stood up slowly. He was a simple man from the farming colonies of New Texas. His people had learned long ago that when someone called for help, you answered. It didn't matter if they were human or alien, friend or stranger. You answered. "How many ships do we have in the fleet?" he asked his first officer, Commander Tom Walsh. Tom, a former Marine with arms like tree trunks, checked his tablet. 12 vessels, sir. The Warhammer. 3 destroyers, 4 frigates, 2 supply ships, and 2 medical vessels. Not much of a fleet, Jake muttered, then looked around the bridge. But it's what we have. He activated the ship's communication system. Throughout the Warhammer, his voice echoed in every corridor, every room, every corner where his crew worked and lived. "This is your captain speaking. Today we received a distress call from a species called the Keth. They're under attack by something called the Hunters. They've been calling for help for 6 months and no one has answered. Well, today that changes." He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew. Young Lisa with her wide eyes. Gruff Bob with his scarred hands. Tom with his steady gaze. These were his people. Earth's children, raised on a world that had tried to kill them since the day they were born. "I know what you're thinking. We're just humans. We're new to this galaxy. We don't have the fancy technology of the older races. We don't have their numbers or their wisdom, but we have something they don't. We have heart." The ship's intercom crackled as crew members throughout the vessel listened to their captain's words. "The galaxy calls us Deathworlders. They say we come from a planet so dangerous that it should have killed us long ago. They say we're violent, unpredictable, and too emotional. Maybe they're right. But today those traits are going to save lives." Jake's voice grew stronger, filled with the conviction that had carried him through every battle he'd ever fought. "We're going to Sector 7G. We're going to find these hunters, and we're going to show them what happens when you hurt innocent people, while Deathworlders are listening." The bridge erupted in cheers. Throughout the ship, similar sounds could be heard as crew members voiced their approval. They were scared, Jake knew. They were facing the unknown, possibly flying toward their deaths, but they were human, and humans didn't run from a fight when others needed help. "Set course for the Vera system," Jake ordered, "and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the 12th Fleet is going to war." The Warhammer's engines roared to life. and humanity's answer to the galaxy began. The Hunter's Domain. The Vera system was a graveyard, where once 3 inhabited worlds had orbited a gentle yellow star. Now only debris and ash remained. The Warhammer dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, and the sight that greeted them made even the hardest veterans curse under their breath. Commander Tom Walsh stood beside Captain Miller, both men staring at the main screen in disbelief. What had once been Vera Prime, home to millions of Keth, was now a broken shell of rock and metal. Massive ships, dark and angular, moved between the ruins like vultures picking at bones. "Jesus Christ," whispered Bob from his station. "What kind of monsters do this?" The Hunter vessels were unlike anything in the Galactic databases. They were black as space itself, covered in spikes and irregular surfaces that seemed to absorb light. Each ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Warhammer, and there were dozens of them. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice tight with emotion. "I'm detecting life signs on the second planet. Weak signals, but they're there." Jake's heart jumped. Survivors. After 6 months of hell, some of the Keth were still alive. "How many?" he asked. "Maybe a few thousand, sir. They're underground, deep in cave systems." Tom pulled up tactical displays on his screen. "Sir, we're outnumbered, 20 to 1. Those Hunter ships are armed with weapons we don't recognize. Our intelligence says they've destroyed every fleet sent against them." Jake nodded grimly. The Hunters had been ravaging the Outer Rim for 2 years, destroying entire civilizations. The Galactic Council had labeled them an acceptable loss and focused on protecting the core worlds. The advanced races had written off species like the Keth as expendable, but humans didn't think that way. "Signal the fleet," Jake ordered. "All ships to battle stations, we're going in." The 12 ships of the human fleet formed up behind the Warhammer. They looked small and fragile against the vast darkness of space, but Jake felt a surge of pride. These were his people, his ships, his responsibility. "Sir," came a new voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from the Hunter fleet." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was cold and mechanical, speaking in perfect standard. "Unknown vessels, you have entered our hunting ground. Depart immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." Jake stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "This is Captain Jake Miller of the United Earth ship Warhammer. We've come for the survivors. Let them go and we'll consider letting you live." A sound like grinding metal came through the speakers. The Hunters were laughing. "Humans. We have heard of your species. Young, weak, foolish. You will make adequate prey. Your ships will burn and your crews will scream as they die. We'll see about that," Jake replied, then cut the connection. The Hunter fleet began to move, their massive ships turning toward the humans with predatory grace. Energy readings spiked as unknown weapons powered up. "Sir," Tom said quietly, "even if we win this fight, we'll lose most of our ships. Maybe all of them." Jake looked around his bridge one more time. Lisa was young enough to be his daughter, her whole life ahead of her. Bob had a wife and 3 kids back on Mars. Tom had served with him for 15 years, through battles that should have killed them both. "I know," Jake said simply. "But those people down there are counting on us. They've been waiting in the dark for 6 months, hoping someone would come. We can't let them down." The first Hunter ship opened fire, sending a beam of crimson energy streaking toward the Warhammer. The human ship rolled hard to port, the deadly beam missing by mere meters. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Jake commanded. "Focus fire on their engines. If we can't outgun them, we'll outrun them." The human fleet scattered, their ships moving with a speed and agility that surprised the Hunters. Where the alien vessels were powerful and heavily armored, the human ships were fast and unpredictable. They darted between the larger ships like wolves attacking a herd of buffalo. The Warhammer's guns roared, sending streams of kinetic rounds into the nearest Hunter vessel. The alien ship's shields flared but held. Return fire lit up the darkness, forcing the human ship into a series of desperate, evasive maneuvers. "Damage report," Jake called out as the ship shook under enemy fire. Hull, breach on deck 7, came the reply. Shields at 60%. The battle had barely begun and already they were taking heavy damage. But Jake smiled grimly as he watched his fleet fight. The hunters had expected easy prey, but they were learning that humans didn't die quietly. The Deathworlders had come to fight. Fire and fury. The battle raged for 3 hours. Space around Vera lit up with weapons fire as the small human fleet darted between the massive hunter vessels like angry hornets. The UES destroyer Phoenix was the first to fall, her hull cracked open by a hunter plasma cannon. 23 crew members died instantly. Captain Miller felt each loss like a knife to his chest, but he couldn't stop. Not with survivors still hiding in the caves below. "Tom, take us in closer," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Sir, that's suicide," his first officer replied, but he was already adjusting their course. The Warhammer dove toward the largest hunter ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed everything else in the system. Its hull was covered in weapon ports, each one capable of destroying a human frigate with a single shot. But Jake had learned something important in the last few hours. The hunters were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They fought like they expected their enemies to run. They didn't know how to handle an opponent who kept coming no matter what. "Lisa, open a channel to all ships," Jake commanded. "Channel open, sir." Jake's voice reached every surviving member of his fleet. "This is Miller. I know you're scared. I know this looks hopeless. But I want you to remember something. We didn't come here to win. We came here to save lives." The frigate Mercury exploded in a ball of fire, taking another 12 crew members with her. Jake's voice never wavered. "The galaxy thinks we're monsters because we come from a death world. They think we're too violent, too dangerous. Today, they're right. Today we show them what monsters can do when they fight for something good." The Warhammer's guns found their mark, punching through the shields of the Hunter flagship. The alien ship shuddered as human weapons tore into its hull. "Bob, target their communication array," Jake ordered. "Got it, sir." The ship's main gun fired, and the Hunter flagship's communication spires exploded in showers of sparks. Suddenly, the coordinated attacks of the Hunter fleet became confused and disorganized. "That's it," Tom shouted. "They're using a hive mind communication system. Cut off the flagship, cut off the fleet." The human ships pressed their advantage, focusing their fire on the wounded flagship. The massive Hunter vessel began to list. To one side, its engines sputtering. But the cost was terrible. Half the human fleet was gone, and the survivors were badly damaged. The medical ship Mercy was running out of supplies, and the Warhammer's hull was held together by emergency patches and prayer. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice shaking, "I'm getting a transmission from the planet's surface." "Put it through." The voice was weak, speaking in the same broken standard they'd heard in the original distress call. "Sky Warriors, we see your fires above. You actually came." Jake's throat tightened. "We're here. Hold on just a little longer. We, Arketh Elder Nam, we speak for the survivors. There are 3,000 of us left. The children are dying. We have no food, no medicine, but we see your battle. You fight for us. Why? We are nothing to you." "Because it's right," Jake said simply. "Because someone has to." There was silence. For a moment, then Nam spoke again. "The hunters. They are not finished. More ships come. We see them on our old scanners. You must go. Save yourselves." "Negative," Jake replied. "We don't leave people behind." The Hunter flagship suddenly exploded, its death throes lighting up the system like a second sun. The remaining Hunter ships began to retreat, but Jake knew Nam was right. This was just the first wave. "Tom, how long until the next Hunter fleet arrives?" "Sensors show massive hyperspace signatures building. Maybe 6 hours. 6 hours to evacuate 3,000 people with what was left of his fleet. It was impossible, but Jake had stopped believing it impossible the day he decided to answer that distress call. "All ships form up on the Warhammer. We're going down to the planet. Bob, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need every ship they can spare. And tell them." Jake paused, looking at the faces of his crew. They were exhausted, bloodied, but their eyes burned with determination. Tell them the Deathworlders aren't done fighting. The surviving human ships descended toward Vera's second planet, where 3,000 aliens waited in the darkness, no longer alone. Above them, the stars began to shift as hyperspace signatures built on the edge of the system. The hunters were coming back, and this time they would bring everything they had. But humanity had answered the call for help, and humans didn't know how to quit. The evacuation. The caves of Vera's second planet were a maze of tunnels carved deep into the rocky surface. Captain Miller stood in the largest cavern, surrounded by the survivors of an entire civilization. The Keth were smaller than humans, with gray skin and large expressive eyes that seemed to hold the weight of their suffering. Elder Nam approached Jake slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. The old Keth's body bore the scars of months spent hiding from the hunters, but his dignity remained intact. "Sky Warrior," Nam said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have waited so long for someone to answer our call. We had given up hope." Jake knelt down to meet the elder's eyes. Around them, Keth children clung to their parents, their faces thin from hunger but alive with wonder at seeing the strange beings who had come to help them. "We're here now," Jake said, "and we're getting you out of here." The evacuation was a nightmare of logistics. 3,000 beings, many of them wounded or sick, had to be moved from deep underground to the surface where the human ships waited. The medical ship Mercy had landed in a clearing near the cave entrance, her crew working frantically to treat the most critical cases. Dr. Ray Davis, the fleet's chief medical officer, had never seen anything like the condition of the survivors. Months of hiding in caves with minimal food and water had taken a terrible toll. The children were especially fragile, their small bodies pushed to the limits of endurance. "Captain," Dr. Davis called out as Jake supervised the loading of another group of refugees. "We're running out of medical supplies, and some of these people won't survive the journey without immediate treatment." Jake nodded grimly. They had rescued the survivors, but keeping them alive long enough to reach safety was another challenge entirely. "Do what you can, Doc. We'll figure out the rest." The work continued for hours. Human crew members carried Keth who were too weak to walk. They shared their own food rations and gave up their bunks to make room for the refugees. The language barrier made communication difficult, but compassion needed no translation. Tom Walsh found Jake in the command center they'd set up near the cave entrance. The first officer's face was grim. "Sir, we've got a problem. The next hunter. Fleet is bigger than we thought. Our long-range sensors are picking up at least 50 ships. They'll be here in 2 hours. Jake felt his heart sink. 50 ships against what was left of his fleet. It was hopeless. "How many people have we evacuated? So far?" "About half. 1,500 are still in the caves, and most of them are too sick or injured to move quickly." Jake stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. They couldn't fight 50 hunter ships, but they couldn't abandon half the survivors either. "Sir," Lisa's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm picking up hyperspace signatures, but they're not coming from the hunter direction." Jake felt a spark of hope. "Who is it?" "Multiple fleets, sir. I'm reading... Jesus, sir, I'm reading over 100 ships." The sky above Vera began to shimmer as vessels dropped out of hyperspace. First came the familiar shapes of Earth Defense Force ships, sleek destroyers and massive dreadnoughts bearing the blue and white colors of humanity. But they weren't alone. Ships Jake had never seen before filled the space above the planet. Elegant, vessels with curved hulls and solar sails. Massive, blocky craft that looked like flying fortresses. Fast attack ships with angular designs that seemed to cut through space itself. "Sir?" Lisa's voice was filled with wonder. "I'm receiving transmissions from everyone. The Altari Confederacy, the Voss Republic, the Mintech Union, even the Crystalline Collective. They're all here." A new voice filled the comm channel, speaking in perfect standard with a musical accent Jake recognized as Altari. "Captain Miller, this is Admiral Kess of the Altari 4th Fleet. We received your transmission and came as quickly as possible. The entire galactic community is here to assist." Jake's throat tightened. "Admiral, I don't understand. Your government classified the Keth as an acceptable loss." "Our government was wrong," Kess replied. "When we heard that humans had risked everything to save people they'd never met, we realized our shame. The younger races have been watching. Your actions, Captain. They're calling it the Battle of Vera. You've shown the galaxy what courage looks like. Another voice joined the channel, this one mechanical and precise. This is Collective Node Prime. We bring medical supplies and engineering. Support, no species should, Doctor. Ray Davis, the fleet's chief medical officer, had never seen anything like the condition of the survivors. Months of hiding in caves with minimal food and water had taken a terrible toll. The children were especially fragile, their small bodies pushed to the limits of endurance. Captain, Dr. Davis called out as Jake supervised the loading of another group of refugees. We're running out of medical supplies, and some of these people won't survive the journey without immediate treatment. Jake nodded grimly. They had rescued the survivors, but keeping them alive long enough to reach safety was another challenge entirely. Do what you can, Doc. We'll figure out the rest. The work continued for hours. Human crew members carried Keth who were too weak to walk. They shared their own food rations and gave up their bunks to make room for the refugees. The language barrier made communication difficult, but compassion needed no translation. Tom Walsh found Jake in the command center they'd set up near the cave entrance. The first officer's face was grim. Sir, we've got a problem. The next hunter fleet is bigger than we thought. Our long-range sensors are picking up at least 50 ships. They'll be here in 2 hours. Jake felt his heart sink. 50 ships against what was left of his fleet. It was hopeless. How many people have we evacuated so far? About half. 1,500 are still in the caves, and most of them are too sick or injured to move quickly. Jake stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. They couldn't fight 50 hunter ships, but they couldn't abandon half the survivors either. Sir, Lisa's voice crackled over the radio. I'm picking up hyperspace signatures, but they're not coming from the hunter direction. Jake felt a spark of hope. Who is it? Multiple fleets, sir, I'm reading. Jesus, sir, I'm reading over 100 ships. The sky above Vera began to shimmer as vessels dropped out of hyperspace. First came the familiar shapes of Earth Defense Force ships, sleek destroyers and massive dreadnoughts bearing the blue and white colors of humanity. But they weren't alone. Ships Jake had never seen before filled the space above the planet. Elegant, vessels with curved hulls and solar sails. Massive, blocky craft that looked like flying fortresses. Fast attack ships with angular designs that seemed to cut through space itself. Sir? Lisa's voice was filled with wonder. I'm receiving transmissions from everyone. The Altari Confederacy, the Voss Republic, the Mintech Union, even the Crystalline Collective. They're all here. A new voice filled the comm channel, speaking in perfect standard with a musical accent Jake recognized as Altari. Captain Miller, this is Admiral Kess of the Altari 4th Fleet. We received your transmission and came as quickly as possible. The entire galactic community is here to assist. Jake's throat tightened. Admiral, I don't understand. Your government classified the Keth as an acceptable loss. Our government was wrong, Kess replied. When we heard that humans had risked everything to save people they'd never met, we realized our shame. The younger races have been watching. Your actions, Captain. They're calling it the Battle of Vera. You've shown the galaxy what courage looks like. Another voice joined the channel. This one mechanical and precise. This is Collective Node Prime. We bring medical supplies and engineering. Support. No species should die alone in the dark. The evacuation took on new urgency as ships from across the galaxy descended to help. Altari medical teams worked alongside human doctors. Voss engineers helped repair damaged equipment. The Crystalline Collective provided shelter and food, but the hunters were still coming. The galaxy united. The final battle for Vera began at dawn on the planet's surface. The combined fleet of over 200 ships from dozens of species faced the incoming hunter. Armada in the space above the scarred world. It was the largest gathering of galactic forces in living memory, all because a human captain had refused to ignore a cry for help. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the Warhammer, now just one ship among many. But his vessel held a place of honor at the center of the formation, the flag of Earth flying proudly alongside the banners of 100 worlds. All ships, this is Admiral Kess, came the voice of the Altari commander. Today we fight not as separate species but as one. Galaxy. The hunters have terrorized our outer worlds for too long. Today that ends. The hunter fleet that emerged from hyperspace was massive beyond anything they'd faced before. Hundreds of the dark, angular ships filled the space around Vera, their weapons already charging for the attack. At their head was a vessel so large it seemed to blot out the stars, a command ship that dwarfed even the biggest galactic dreadnoughts. But the galaxy was ready. The Altari ships moved with elegant precision, their energy weapons painting the darkness with streams of silver light. The Voss battleships opened up with massive kinetic cannons that could punch through a moon. The Crystalline Collective's living ships pulsed with organic weapons that seemed to grow stronger with each shot. And at the heart of it all, the human ships fought with the desperate courage that had brought them here in the first place. Jake watched the battle unfold around him, his heart swelling with pride, not just for his own people but for all of them. The galaxy had found its courage again, and it was beautiful to see. "Sir," Tom called out, "the Hunter command ship is targeting the refugee transports." Jake's blood ran cold. The evacuation ships were defenseless, packed with Keth survivors who had already suffered so much. "All human ships form up on me," Jake commanded. "We're going to stop that thing." The remains of the 12th Fleet moved as one, their battered ships accelerating toward the massive Hunter command vessel. They were joined by ships from across the galaxy, captains who had found their own courage in humanity's example. The Hunter command ship's weapons were unlike anything they'd seen before, beams of dark energy that seemed to tear holes in space itself. But the combined fleet pressed forward, their guns hammering at the alien vessel's shields. "Their shields are adapting," Bob reported. "Our weapons are having less effect." Jake gritted his teeth. They'd come too far to fail now. "Lisa, open a channel to all ships, all frequencies." "Channel open, sir." Jake's voice reached every ship in the combined fleet, human and alien alike. "This is Captain Miller. I know their shields are strong. I know their weapons are powerful. But I want you to remember something. We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right of innocent people to live in peace." The Hunter command ship's main gun began to charge, its target clearly the refugee transports below. "Every species here today has children," Jake continued. "Every one of us knows what it means to love something more than our own lives. The Hunters don't understand that. They think power is everything. Today, we show them they're wrong." Combined fleet pressed forward, their attack intensifying. The Hunter shields began to flicker and fail under the sustained assault. "Their shields are down," someone shouted over the comm. The final assault was swift and decisive. Energy beams, kinetic rounds, and exotic weapons from across the galaxy converged on the Hunter command ship. The massive vessel shuddered, its hull cracking under the bombardment. Then it exploded. The destruction of their command ship sent shockwaves through the Hunter fleet. Without their coordinating influence, the remaining ships began to retreat, their formation breaking apart as they fled into hyperspace. The battle was over. The galaxy had won. Jake stood on his bridge, watching as rescue ships descended to complete the evacuation. The last of the Keth survivors were being loaded onto transport vessels, their long nightmare finally at an end. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. The President wants to speak with you." Jake smiled. "Tell her I'll call her back. I've got some new friends to check on first." As the Warhammer descended toward Vera's surface, Jake thought about the distress signal that had started it all. A simple cry for help that had reached across the void and found the one species crazy enough to answer. The galaxy called them Deathworlders. Today, that name had saved 3,000 lives. And maybe, just maybe, it had saved the galaxy's soul as well.